just very briefly, my name is Christina Töpfer. I'm the editor-in-chief of the magazine Kamera Austria International, which is based in Graz, in Austria. And I have the wonderful task to moderate this talk tonight and to introduce the festival's two curators to you. There are Dr. Susan Bright and Nina Strand. So they are also the first international curators of F-Stop Festival in Leipzig, which is being held in its 9th edition this year. And in the next minutes or in the next hour, we are going to give you a brief insight into the festival's main exhibition that is titled Trust, and into the Curatorial concept of the show, which you can visit until July 4th at the Halle 12 of the Spinnerei here in Leipzig. But before we speak about the exhibition in more detail, I would like to introduce the festival's curators. So Susan Bright, she is joining us from London tonight because she could not come to Leipzig due to the pandemic. And she is a curator based in London with a specialization in lens-based arts and contemporary visual culture. She was a curator at the National Portrait Gallery in London before deciding to work independently at the beginning of the 2000s. And she has curated and co-curated various exhibitions in England and internationally. For example, How We Are at Tate Britain, Face of Fashion at the National Portrait Gallery, Home Truths at the Photographers Gallery in London, and also Playground at the Serlachius Museum in Finland. Susan was also a guest curator of Foto España in 2019, where she curated 5 photo exhibitions across museums in Madrid. And she has taught curatorial practice and visual culture at institutions including Parsons and the School of the Visual Arts in New York, at the Sotheby's Institute in London, and at the University of the Arts in London. And furthermore, she has authored and co-authored 7 books on photography, and she holds a PhD from Goldsmiths College in London. Then there is my dear colleague Nina Strand, who is based in Oslo, and she is also here in Leipzig. Actually, we're right now in the same hotel in different spaces. And Nina, she works as an artist, writer, and she's also the founder and editor-in-chief of the magazine Objektiv. It's a magazine that was founded in 2009 by Nina Strand, Ida Kirov, and Susanne Östby-Seter. And it's a biennial publication with a focus on photography and film. As an artist, Nina has published 4 artist books so far. And she's also a regular contributor to various Norwegian magazines and publications, international publications. Furthermore, she has participated in and arranged several exhibitions all over Scandinavia. And the last of these was the exhibition Le Book Club, which was held at Fotogalleriet in Oslo at the beginning of 2020. And she has also been involved in the Paris Photo Aperture Foundation Photo Book Awards, and she was also a member of the jury of the Kamera Austria Award for Contemporary Photography of the city of Graz, where we first met actually 2 years ago. And she was part of the expert panel of the seminar Photo Book Reset at CO Berlin and a fellow of the MFA Image Text Ithaca Summer Workshop. And yeah, so far for the introduction. And as I already said, it's the first time the festival F-Stop is being curated by 2 international curators. And this has actually been even harder during the very challenging conditions of the pandemic over the last year. So the board of the F-Stop Festival, which consists of Steffen Siegel, Katrin Schuneck, Nadine Wittlisbach. Sorry, there are just people coming in here. And Jan Wenzel from Spectre Books and me. So we were 5 people on the board who were invited by the festival's directors, Stefanie Abelmann and Christian Budach. It was actually in the June 2020, so when the first lockdowns were being cut, but it was still during the pandemic, and we were living in quite insecure times. And the topic Nina and Susan suggested the festival should revolve around is trust. which in your introductory text you describe as the currency of the 21st century. And I think it would be quite interesting to dive into this directly into the topic of the exhibition. Could you maybe elaborate a bit on how the notion of trust became your topic and how it is being reflected in the exhibition so I guess it's nice to have an overall impression of the topic before we have a look at the artists that are being presented in more detail.
We can't, you have to, your audio is...
I'm unmuted now. So first of all, thank you for that lovely introduction and for those joining us. So I think when we sat down and thought about what we were going to propose, I think this was really the only topic which seemed to resonate at the time, because as you were saying, it was a time of very kind of high alert, and things were very much taking place kind of in front of our eyes, which we were unable to grasp, things like the virus and the news that we were getting. Trump was in power. We couldn't trust who we were, our friends, our family, had they gone out? Were they wearing a mask? Should we wear a mask? So much was up in the air, and trust was the thing that seemed to kind of root everything. And if you don't have trust, then everything kind of just went a bit crazy. And that's what it felt like, I think, for both of us when we were talking. So that's how it became the issue that we proposed. Nina, is there anything that you feel that should be in there?
No, I think it was perfect. But it's based, I mean, what we proposed is based from a longer conversation you and I have had since we met in Paris in 2017. So it's a kind of, both this working with the festival has been an ongoing process, but I also feel, the concept has been ongoing for a while, I would say.
Yeah, and it's been really a fascinating topic to work with, because it's really complex. And I think when you go, oh yeah, I understand trust, I know what it is. It's when I, trust somebody and they are kind, and it's about reciprocity and respect. But actually, once you start kind of really thinking about it, then it becomes a much more nebulous concept, and one that shapeshifts and changes, and one that you can't define. All the different disciplines define it in a different way. And whether it's to do with computational trust or organizational trust or personal trust, it's all different. And we really like that. We really like the fact you couldn't grab it, because it's the same as photography. You can't, every time you think about photography, it kind of slips through your fingers. And this theme is kind of the same. So it did seem a perfect one to work with for this particular time.
And with these particular artists, as we have sort of in our ongoing conversations on photography, many of these has been the ones we circled around. Why are we fascinated by these artists, and what are they doing that sort of keeps our curiosity so high?
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that they dealt with all these different aspects of trust was, so it opened it up. It didn't feel, we never wanted a didactic kind of exhibition where this deals with trust in this way, or this deals with trust in that way. That's not the kind of curators we are. We're the kind of curators that will kind of put something out there, and it's up to the viewer to the audience to kind of work with that material and think about trust themselves. And I think what was really interesting as well for me was, I tend to kind of research really heavily and then apply. But this has been a really different process, and one that I've really loved, because it's been very ongoing. And I've had to let that particular method of going, which is, I think, quite an academic way of working, let it go. And I think the digital wanderings were a great way to do that.
This actually also leads to my next question, because I guess you also had to have a lot of trust into each other as two curators who are not living in the same city, not even in the same country, and whose collaboration for this festival was quite hardened by the circumstances of the last year, I guess. Could you maybe tell us a bit about the collaboration between you, so how it worked over the last year, and also how you were able to create a link to the city of Leipzig, to the photography scene here, also to the festival team that is based here, and the spaces in the city, because when you handed in the concept for the exhibition, you actually had not been in Leipzig, and it was only in September that you had the first chance, as far as I remember, to travel here. And before that, everything was really done remotely. Could you tell us a bit more about this process of working together and trusting each other?
You're going to take that one.
So, I mean, this is the best year. This has been the best year to create a show together with someone in another country. Because everyone, I mean, the new forms of communications, Zoom as we're on now, and others that have since been forgotten, it is the way everyone works. And it's also been we were lucky to be there in September, and then afterwards everything went to complete lockdown. And this sort of creating something that we were unsure of would happen, and therefore made our digital program to begin once we were announced as curators. So we began our digital program because we wanted to stretch the festival as long as we could, or our exhibition as long as we could, and also as a sort of precaution if we didn't open the end of June, if we had to prolong it even further. So I think it's been, and I think we both had good contacts in Leipzig from before, and also in Berlin. So I think we had a good sort of feeling of it. Of course, we have a much better feeling of it now, and also with the Art Academy that we've worked very close with, that has made a beautiful exhibition next to ours in the Hall 14. So
I've got nothing more to add.
No?
Yeah.
Then I guess it would be nice to dive into the exhibition, which you in your introductory text also describe as like 7 mini solo exhibitions actually. So there are 7 international artists who are being presented in the Halle 12. And I would suggest that we enter into this directly. So the first artist that is part of the Trust exhibition is Carmen Winan. She's an American artist and writer who is based in Columbus, Ohio, and Carmen has developed a new series of works for the festival, which I found quite fascinating. And actually it's being shown in Leipzig in 2 different places. So there are, I think, 45 city lights throughout Leipzig where you can see posters of the images from her series. And there's also a whole assemblage of the images she collected of hand gestures right at the entrance of the Spinnereigelände, or at the Halle 12. And what I think quite interesting about Carmen's work is how many aspects of trust become visible in the collection of hand gestures she has assembled over several years. And it has always fascinated me about her work, how she touches on topics of great intimacy through a photographic way, but actually without doing photographs on her own, but she just, or not just, but in a really long, ongoing and very precise process, she creates those collections. I guess it would be nice to have a small insight, like a filmic insight into the work, and maybe you could tell us a bit more about that, Nina and Susan.
Well, Carmen was always someone we wanted to work with. Nina had worked with her before, I'd written about her work before, and it's someone who had come up in conversations a lot, that this was somebody who felt very vital, very of the moment, very critical, very crucial to where we were, or someone that we wanted almost from the very start to do something outside. We had envisaged something that going into the city, because they can be quite mysterious, and just to have that encounter with her work in the city was something that we really wanted to kind of do right from the start. And I remember she was in the proposal with that idea. So the commission was, again, here we go with trust, you know, with the commission you really have to let go. You give a brief, but you have to trust that artist to respond to the brief in whatever way without kind of interfering. So there was a very high level of trust between us and Carmen.
We see a short insight into the exhibition. There's a whole series of hands, like I think she started collecting the hands of actresses, right? Like of Marlene Dietrich first. And then she had this whole series that evolved further and further.
Yeah, she started with a book that she got from a neighbor with images of Marlene Dietrich's hands, and it just sort of grew on her. And she had that book from many moves and just couldn't get these images out of her mind. And so it grew to all these different actresses' hands and made into this sort of large notebooks, as she calls, as she says about them. And here we see one of the images that has one hand that is out in the city, and this is sort of more the notebooks version of it.
So yeah, so there's the smaller versions and then the bigger hands outside, but for the exhibition we combine them both. Throughout the smaller posters, the hands tend to be either kind of braced for a fall or up in a way. And I love when we were talking to her about how this idea of hands up has changed from being something of a celebration. We both say, we think of it as that song, like Hands in the Air. It is a positive movement, but it's also, especially in the States, following George Floyd, the hands up become something much more sinister, much more tied into the current situation, especially in the States, with the police issues there. So I love the way her work kind of reverberates widely. You think it's quite concise, but actually it's concentric circles always kind of tie into much more contemporary issues as well.
Should we then continue with the work of Huda Afshar? So that's the one that is presented next in the exhibition. Huda Afshar is an artist who was born in Tehran in Iran and who is now based in Melbourne. And she's presenting a slideshow projection that we see in this little film snippet. And it's titled Speak the Wind, it was conceived in 2021 and will also be published in book form by Mac Books this month. What she does in the series is to question the evidence character of documentary photography by focusing on the notion of faith as something that cannot be seen, and it's also about myth and also a lot about trust. Maybe you could tell us a bit about the story that from which the series developed, Nina and Susan, because there's this really very nice story of the people living where she took the photographs.
Yeah, Nina, do you want to take that?
Spirits. You go.
Okay. So, as you said, originally Huda is from Iran, and there's a series of small islands where there's always been a lot of immigration of various slave trades from all over the country, from all over the world. And it's believed that the winds are possessed with all these different cultures, and they will possess people. They're evil. The spirits, the winds are possessed and take people over. So Huda was fascinated by that, but also the ceremonies that surrounded these winds to expel the spirits. So she would film and also photograph the shamans that would use all the different languages from all those different countries, dancing and music and incense to get rid of those spirits. But she describes the project a bit like magic realism. So you're never quite sure what's real, what's fake, what's constructed, what's staged. And the landscape, as you can see here, has a very kind of alien environment as well. And there's this beautiful line in the essay at the beginning of the book where it says those rocks feel like they've been crafted by God. You know, there's a very unwieldy feel to the whole project. And originally we invited Huda for the Digital Wanderings, and we didn't know about this work because it hadn't been published. And she showed it to us, and both Nina and I were like, whoa, we have to have this in the exhibition. Because also it deals with this idea of faith, as you said, and absolute trust being really key to faith. And that was something that we hadn't kind of dealt with a lot of the other artists. So we felt it was a much more kind of more metaphysical way of thinking about trust as well.
Yeah, I think it becomes also very obvious in the images that they're so enigmatic in a way, right? If you don't know the story behind them, they seem to be documentary, but still there's also something quite, not uncanny, but a bit not realistic in them, which might be this reference to magical realism.
Yeah, completely. And also the fact that she is a documentary photographer in a very intelligent way that sort of deconstructs it at the same time. She's very aware of those arguments around kind of witness and you know, positions of power within documentary, and she plays with those and works with those throughout the body of work.
I think it especially becomes very immersive in the kind of installation you chose to present the work, with the slideshow, with the different projections on different sides.
Yeah, you do get a feeling like you're inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nina, sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, and these 4 slideshows are made especially also for the show. So very much of what the show has been new, and we have the book by Mac actually in the reading space, which we'll see later. So we urge people to stand. I hear that people have been there and sort of stand in the middle and be immersed by all the winds. It's a good idea, they say.
Then I would move on to the work of Ingrid Eggen, who is a Norwegian artist. She was also present in Leipzig these days. And she's presented in the exhibition with 2 series. Actually, one is called Hands from 2020, and the other one is Grippe from 2021. And they're in the exhibition, they're presented in the next room. And as in the work of Carmen Wynand, we again see hands as she also examines the body's nonverbal communication and symbolism that is expressed through gestures of the hand. So there we see many different forms of hands, which will be described in a small interview we prepared with Ingrid. And so they're hands reaching out, or hands touching each other, hands holding each other, or which are also in a somewhat unclear position where we're not sure what is going to happen. And I guess it's quite an interesting motive throughout your exhibition, of which you also taught me that it happened a bit accidentally. So there were some works you chose that had hands in it, but there were also some surprises where they popped up. And yeah, maybe we have a look at them. The installation first in the exhibition, and then we will see a short interview and presentation Ingrid prepared for this talk.
In this work, I've been inspired by how living things continuously develop new physical and psychological capabilities in response to changed living conditions. The work is based on bodily adaptation and response, where I try to imagine how mental processes, thoughts, and experience make new compositional structures in the body. I look for new opportunities in motion and are interested in what happens when motion is interrupted, distorted, bent, and restricted, and how this will affect how we react, communicate, and observe. So my method is often based on creation of inner conflicts in the body or body parts, a conflict between the body's controlled physical aspects, the muscles and bones, and our more instinctive and affective drives. Through this conflict, I try to find new nonverbal languages and expressions and open the body up for new connections with the possibility to exceed limitations. Grabbing and throwing were among man's first step towards advancement, and I have used those hand functions for the developing of these gestures. And often they find themselves in between the two, almost like slipping the grip. The hand's ability to grip and throw is for them a means to respond, but instead of mirroring another individual's gestures, these hands reflect on themselves. As a consequence, maybe, for surrounded pressure or mistrust in others. These hands aims to advance within an anatomical form through some sort of degradation of that same anatomical structure. A challenge of perspective and anatomical organization. In this work, I've been inspired by how living things continuously develop new physical.
I think she said it brilliantly in her speak about her work. She's showing 8 new works also, especially for trust, and has been an ongoing process for her. Do you think we should say more about the work, Susan?
Yeah, I'm just really fascinated by her work, kind of looking at it through the kind of pandemic lens, because I think it's really hard not to look at all the art actually that's shown here through a pandemic lens. And I don't know when we're going to lose that. And the fact that we're all so used to this format here, and in fact I really speak with my hands, so it's like, and that we've lost all those gestures, those utterances, those moments in between. That make meetings, you know, I can't glance at Nina in a meeting and go, okay, right, we need to move on, which is what you would normally do in a meeting, but you've lost, all that's been stripped away. So you've had to kind of learn new gestures. So Ingrid's work for me has really resonated, I think, differently than it would have done even like 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. I look at it differently, I respond to it differently, and it kind of gets me a bit more here now than perhaps it would have done. I would have looked at it kind of intellectually, and now I look at it much more emotionally as well.
Yeah, I guess those are really nice words that might also lead us to the next artist in the exhibition. And what I really like in it is the connection you created between Ingrid's work and the one of Laure Provost. Laure, she is a French artist who also represented France at the Venice Biennial in 2019 in a very immersive and fascinating exhibition that was curated by Martha Kirstenbaum back then. And here in Leipzig, you present 2 video works of Laure, which were actually also created before the pandemic. I think one of them was realized in 2010, I Need to Take Care of My Conceptual Granddad, and the other one in 2019, which is called Taking Care, Love Letters to Fellow Artwork. And I also find it quite fascinating here how those works that were conceived in a totally different context suddenly get a whole new dimension. And she also shared them during the pandemic. That's something what you, Nina, taught me yesterday, that it was somehow also a work that comforted us as viewers, but also fellow artists, and like that things might be fine again in the future. Could you tell us a bit about those works, and maybe we also have a short look at the installation views from the exhibition?
Yeah, I can talk while we look at the installation. So the first one, both of them are, as you say, related to each other. The first one, 2010, in that one she is smothering moisturizer over a book by John Latham, which was a mentor for her, and she's sort of taking care of that book. And in the 2019 film, it's intended for a gallery space, so we're very happy to show it in a gallery space as we do now. But in the spring of the first lockdown, she showed it on her website and on her Galleries Listens website, and it really did offer comfort in the trying times. And you can see both in both films, she's making the hands the main character, and she doesn't show her face, and she speaks to the viewer. And in this film, as you can see, she's kind of she's caressing the camera. And as she whispers, I will take care of you, kiss you. If you feel old, if you feel out of time or not in fashion anymore, I will be there for you. And we are so happy that we can place it in Laure's room. We've also placed books and publications from different digital wanderers and the artists themselves, and another art piece, the installation Animal Holes Selfie by the American artist Whitney Hubbs. One of them that was also featured on our digital wandering program online, and which will be a book this September called Say So. So it was very sort of nice, now I'm gesturing also, a nice way to sort of move, to get the digital wandering into the space. And we did talk about this, Susan and I, with all these hands, that the exhibition at one point could have been called Touch, and that's also what we miss. But touch is trust, so there you go. Here is Whitney Hubbs' installation with a mirror, and on the shelves, many of the books that we have featured throughout.
Sorry. Okay.
Please go.
I was agreeing. I was saying it was so nice, because at one point we were unsure if there was even going to be an exhibition to get those digital wanderings physically into the space and to sort of cross both of the spaces that we were working in. So for me, you know, that lovely book of material things that you can pick up and touch and flick through really have an important part within the actual physical space.
Maybe it would also be good to learn a bit more about the digital wanderings for our audience who's maybe not yet aware of the format, because it's something that accompanied you since the beginning of when you started thinking about the festival, right? So it was a digital format which also followed the process, how you conceived the festival. Would you like to tell us a bit more about it? Or
yeah, well, you can start telling us about where they came from.
Yeah, so I'll just do that and then I'll leave it to you. So it's taken from an idea instigated on the Objective site that also happened in April last year, where we invite photographers to make their visual wanderings, and then there's wanderings, walking wanderings, and not wanderings. I'm saying it in the same way. To look at what a photographer does when the world stands still, and what kind of images does a photographer or an artist make when they can't go out in the world and when they're in the studio, and what do they do. And it's a series, this is sort of relay, and we wanted to sort of look at this in the digital wanderings format. And I'll give it to you.
Okay. So we wanted to invite all kinds of people. We didn't want to just have artists. And this is what I was sort of referred to earlier about kind of research and process, where we allowed our research to be led by other people. So very early on, we had a professor of bioethics talking about trust in bioethics, which is nothing we had ever considered or thought about. And when you sit and listen to it, you go, oh yeah, there's doctor-patient trust, and there's that kind of trust. And that was a really unusual and wonderful way to work, I've got to say, where you just again, we kind of trusted the people to do what they do, and to let us think about trust in a really wide way. So twice a month, we'd commission somebody with often a very, very wide brief to consider trust. And they could do whatever they wanted. So yeah, we had scholars, we had artists, we had, my mind's gone blank now, thinking about theorists, the brilliant Katrina Sluice in there. We have
bookshop. We had the French bookshop, the Pierre & Co. in Paris, to sort of consider what photo books are made on trust.
We had Fred Huning, who's a German artist, looking back to the GDR and representations in the press there, and to think about the media now. And it was, it was a lovely, everyone was a surprise, we often didn't know what was going to come up. So it was a really fun thing for us to do as curators as well.
And it's still continuing. We're still presenting the artist in this format. So we've done interviews and taking quotes from every artist, and it comes every second day while the festival is up. So it's not done before the festival is over.
Yeah, and it will stay on the festival webpage, right? So we can read everything that was published and have a look at that so far. and it's ongoing, which is really nice, I think. But you also instilled a lot of trust in your contributors when you invited them. So it was just like a carte blanche, as far as I understood it, right?
Yeah, yeah. But I think we're both quite risky people. I think we kind of like that risk, you know. What are we going to get? You know, it makes our job more fun as well, and more interesting, more challenging to have that. So
yeah, and again, we're doing this in a very strange time, so we don't know if it will open again. And so doing a digital program and risking things and inviting felt very natural. In these times that we're in, yeah.
Okay, thank you for this little excursus into the digital wanderings. Then I would jump back into the exhibition that can be visited at Halle 12. And another artist you are presenting there is Paul Mpagi-Sipuya. And he's a photographer who's based in Los Angeles. And in the show you are presenting very early works of his that date back to 2005 and 2011. I was quite surprised when I saw them yesterday. And you had a chance to lend them from a collector in Berlin. You taught us yesterday. And yeah, as I said, it's really surprising to see those small formats in the exhibition, because when you see Paul's current work, it's rather huge. And there are his mirror studies, which deal with the same topics, but in the work that is presented in the show, I guess, there are certain traits and topics that become already apparent that he has been following very consequently over the years. And I was really stunned by that. So how clear and straightforward he is taking images of the gay community that surrounds him, and people who confides very much into and with whom he shares a lot of trust. Obviously, otherwise it would not be possible to take the images. So I think it would be nice to maybe have a look at some impressions from the show. And then you, Nina and Susan, could you maybe elaborate a bit on what made you choose Paul's work and where his strong conceptual and approach of portraying gay men comes from me? So because I had the impression it comes from a certain lack of images that existed when he started, right?
So we're showing a private collection from a collector, very generous collector in Berlin, who has a relationship or known Paul for very long. And these are the scenes. He made these scenes called Shoot. It was a very big part of the culture at that time. And as you said, Christina, he was, at the time he started with this work that we show in the exhibition, he was reflecting on what kind of photographs he wanted to see and what was sort of lacking, he felt, when he looked in magazines. And what he wanted to do is to find something that is a new narrative for the queer community, not the traumatic narrative that had been at that time told for so long, but he wanted to see a queer community that had a casual shared intimacy, radiating notions of friendship, generosity, romance, and creativity. At the same time, he wanted to deconstruct the making of portraiture, the moving of subjectivity, and identify how images are made and seen and circulate. And many of the subjects that we see in these portraits have continued to appear across his work, re-emerging as subjects and collaborators in studio work, as you mentioned, in darkroom projects and other bodies of work up to the present. So it was interesting because we had worked with him before and his current work to see where it all kind of started.
Yeah. And as you're saying, there are elements that you can see of that deconstruction of the image. You can just see here with the cameras, and also behind the scenes, we've got some very small studio pictures, very intimate, kind of still lives, and you can see that backstage kind of coming into the image. So it's all there. You could, but just beginning to be conceptualized, I think.
Yeah. Actually, it's also quite a humorous work, I think. Like, I mean, when you see those images in an exhibition today, they're really like perfect and very well done and well printed images. But you also always get a sense of the humor and with which he approaches portraiture, right? Like it's very playful, and it's at the same time it's very hard, I guess, to do things and to take these images in this precise way. But at the same time, he just maybe lets trust develop between him and the people he portrays and the camera, and actually also the viewers. And it's a very trustful work, I find. So
yeah.
I think in portraiture there's often that power, an uneven power balance between the portraiture and the person being photographed, and that kind of disappears within this work. And instead of the power, it's intimacy, and that really comes across in the images. That you get that this is a collaboration between the sitter and the photographer, and operates slightly different from a lot of studio portraiture.
Yeah, otherwise you would probably not have been able to take the photographs in the way. No. Then would you still like to add something on Paul's work, or should we move on to Viktoria?
We can push on.
Yeah, actually Viktoria Bintschok is also, she's a German photographer who actually also studied in Leipzig at the HGB and who's currently living in Berlin. And she's also an artist who is creating images in a very specific way, where she uses computational algorithms actually from Google image search to create new images. And in the exhibition, we see her series networked images, or some images from networked images, which is an ongoing project that started in 2017. And yeah, actually she arranges these images that she finds on the internet, and that of course underlie a certain algorithm of research in a completely new way, just by bringing together certain visual parallels that she discovers between them. And actually it doesn't mean that they always have to pop up in these constellations, but they could also be assembled in different ways. And yeah, we have this small insight into the exhibition, and then also prepared a small presentation where Viktoria speaks about her work herself, which we will have a look at now.
Some years ago, I discovered the possibility of image search algorithms, and I started to work with this machine. So to upload my personal view on the world and to see what comes back from this image flow. So I was wondering, what are these images about? So in this digital flow, we think about this floating image, about the circulation of images, but it's such an abstract idea of this image flow. And I wanted to make them physical, to get them out of this flow and to put them into physical space and to physical world and see what they are about, and also to combine them with my personal views. So it's about my images and other people's images. So it's an interrelation, because I think the images we are surrounded by online, they have such an impact on our lives and our society in general. And we, of course, reflect on these images and they come back. So it's a constant interrelation. And this is something I try to visualize with these networked images. And also images online, they're mixed up genres. So that you have private images, you have product shots, and all the different kind of contexts. And what I do is I just focus on the visuality only. So images as such are in this work. So you have no source, no context, and you see just without any information about or any story. You just see the visual information only. As I said, I upload my own image, so it's also about sharing my imagery and also taking images, and I restage the found JPEGs. So I never use actually the found image. I always use the idea of this image, and I don't say so much about which was first, which was mine, which I found, but mostly the images you see that are showing the physical world, like street scenes or like clouds. This might be something about my own view on the world. So images happen on travels, on journeys, on whatever, when I'm around. So I just use my camera to shoot something I think it might be interesting, because I'm collecting these images which are not clearly showing something specific. They're kind of abstract for the machine. So the artificial image doesn't immediately see something in it, something concrete. So if you see this woman in front of the yellow wall, we see it as a woman in front of a yellow wall, but the machine doesn't recognize it clearly as a human being. So it connects it to something abstract, like this yellow sheet of paper. So this is what happens.
I find it quite interesting how you bring a different notion of trust into the exhibition with Viktoria Bintschok's work, actually, because it's not only about the trust between people, but also about the trust we have into images, right? And things they convey and which we see, but which could also mean something totally different for machine.
Yeah, that was important. We wanted the exhibition, although I think both of our interests tend to sort of concentrate on the interpersonal. We did want to, like with Hoda and Viktoria, and same with Guan Yu, we wanted to widen that out, to think about photography, but also to think about where we are with computational trust. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we have to trust Google. We have to trust Google. We will Google things. Let's Google it. You know, we immediately trust it without kind of thinking. We know we shouldn't, and we know that you can't trust everything you see on the internet. But we have to. You know, we're in the situation where we're completely bound to it in a way. And I think we were both interested in this idea of Viktoria. Like, again, it's like if she puts in her image, she's going to get a whole bunch of different images come up, depending on what she's bought, what she's looked at, where she is, than say if we had put that image in. So this idea of trust is completely nebulous and changing all the time. So it was really important to us to have that in the mix, to sort of widen out this concept of trust.
Yeah, I think it's actually also quite interesting how she chooses to pick out very specific images from this whole stream, like endless stream actually, of images that circulate on the internet, and to just bring them into physical space. It's also quite surprising, I think, in the work.
Yeah, and I think the room went very well. I think it's a room of sort of wonder you come into, and you don't really know what these clusters are, and the sort of explanation on the wall gives to them. And it's sort of very, and it is, I remember you said, Susan, it's very humorous. Her work has very much humor in the sort of thing you don't grasp. And again, when we have been at home and probably seen more images than ever online, it's a good commentary on what these images do to us.
Okay, I guess I would move to the last artist you're presenting in the exhibition. He's a Chinese-born artist living in the US, Guan Yu. And in the show, you're presenting 3 series of works by him. And they're the 2 photographic series that are presented in opposition to each other along the long walls. Resident Aliens from 2021 and Temporary Censored Home from 2018 to 19. And there's also a quite, just speaking about humorous, I think, video work where he has a conversation with his mother, which is Complex Formation from 2018. And actually all of those 3 works, they revolve around a certain form of authority and like an outsider status that he feels as an Asian person living in the US, but also as an Asian gay man living in the US, and the connections he still has to the Chinese culture where he comes from and where he was brought up. And I would suggest that we also here have a short view into the exhibition, and then you maybe tell us a bit more about the different works by Guan-Su.
Yes, his work, in different ways, we say that each piece sort of considers the outsiders through investigation into political history and also personal identity. And in Temporary Censored Home, it is his parents' home in China, and where he highlights the connections not only between China and the USA, but also his own life as a gay man, as opposed to his parents' more conservative heterosexual lifestyle.
But also, for me, it's really interesting to see these works with sort of sandwiched between Carmen and Viktoria, because with Carmen, she's dealing with collage, but in a completely different way from the way that he is, because he's plastered these rooms with pictures of, so in Resident Aliens, of the refugees' belongings. So he's making a kind of installation within the room and then photographing it. So in a way, it is a kind of collage. So it's kind of interesting to think about how photography operates within that wide idea of what collage is. And authority, it's also nice to kind of think about it with Viktoria, where, you know, Google is now an authority that we have to trust. And yet he's dealing with, you know, kind of political authority, be that Chinese or American, and where photography operates within that system. So these refugees had to take or show photographs to show that they were married or they had a kind of authentic life. And what makes those photographs authentic, but his not, is really crucial. So again, they're all thinking about the medium of photography, this role of truth telling in a way. You know, we've all got away from that, but it still kind of underpins the work in his. It doesn't underpin it. It's just there. You know, it's in the mix of when you're looking and understanding those images.
And he also says there's a deeper trust that exists in this work, especially of the recent work. And he said, because it's produced in this pandemic with the collaborators trying to become immigrants of the United States, they invite him to their space and their vulnerable state. And he finds these participants who hold different visa statuses in the United States, and says that the series present the complicated condition that immigrants experience in the US. And he wants to ask with the work, in this interconnected world, how do we define citizenship and the legality? No, I can't say it. How a person is legal. You can say it. Legal.
You got it right.
Legality.
Yeah.
And it's exactly that. And he talks about the reluctant trust one must put in the authorities. And I think and I think also, again, I'll do PR for the Digital Wandering, his presentation coming. He says very many beautiful things about his work. So look forward to that. That's the teaser.
And all that time that he was making that work, Trump was in power, and these people felt very, very powerless. So again, that's really important to consider when looking at the work.
So that was 7 photographic positions, yes, dealing with trust in very many different ways.
Thank you very much, Susan and Nina, for giving us an insight into your show Trust, that is on view at Halle 12 of Spinnerei in Leipzig until July 4th still. And I guess from this overview of the exhibition, it would be nice to also open up the scope a bit, and maybe there are also some questions from the audience that they would like to share with us, with the curators of the exhibition.
It's all right if there isn't.
Or maybe not. Otherwise, I would still have a question, which might also maybe be a good transition to the talk that will happen tomorrow at 6 p.m. again, how your collaboration with, for example, the HGB worked, because I found it really fascinating. I did not attend the talk, of course, but I know you shared your concept and actually the work you did for the festival with different students from HGB, and they also trusted your concept and you trusted them to develop something from there. Could you maybe tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so they were the first people to really hear about the concept, weren't they? They, you know, outside of the festival, and they were a really fantastic audience, very engaged. And then from there, they've put together an exhibition on trust, or their work that considers trust. And Nina and I both did a day of tutorials with them, where they shared their work and we talked to them about the concept and about their work. And it was really nice collaboration. It kind of sewed us into the city in a way that is otherwise a little tricky sometimes.
Yeah, I saw the exhibition today and I was really impressed by the works I saw there. So I really liked it a lot. And yeah, I can highly recommend to the people who are watching to go to also the ground floor of Halle 14 at Spinnerei, and to also attend the talk that will happen tomorrow on the exhibition Come Closer by HGB, which was conceived by the photography class of Özlem Altin. So,
we too recommend it highly.
Yeah, brilliant work, brilliant work.
And yeah, we said we would have 1 hour. If there are not more questions, should we?
Yeah, we're 1 hour and 1 minute.
Yeah.
I mean, we can discuss endlessly also, I guess. But there are many different aspects that pop also up when you have a look at the various artists you're presenting in the exhibition.
Yeah, and just to say, if anyone's more interested in going into the theme more, or reading about the artists, then do check out the Digital Wanderings, and also an essay that we wrote is also up on the website now as well. So there's tons of information that you can access.
And I'll be there tomorrow. Susan will be there digitally for the last curator tour before the sort of festival continues.
It will be tomorrow at 3 p.m.
Tomorrow
right?
at 3 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have questions here, maybe you have a question tomorrow at 3 or a little after.
Yeah. And there will also be a whole series of other talks the upcoming days until next Sunday, until July 4th, I guess. Each day at 6 p.m. also on the various satellites of the festival, which are also all worth to see, I would say. So thank you, Susan and Nina, for sharing your curatorial concept and the artists you invited with us. And yes, I'm curious to still see some shows of the festival, and also to stay in touch and to follow the digital wanderings more.
Great, thank you. Wonderful chair.
Thanks a lot and have a nice evening.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Anna.
Bye.